Hey everybody, Nick Nack here, back again for another video. Now, this video is kinda overdue, as it's February right now, but it's talking about something last year, and that of course is my top 10 movies of 2017. Surprisingly, last year, I have watched a ton of movies. Probably because I have a Letterboxd account, or maybe it's because I watch a whole ton of people here on YouTube that enjoy movies as well. So I thought, why not make my favorite movies countdown, since I watched over 10 or more. And also, I know it's kinda late because it's February right now, but hey, the week for the Academy Awards is almost here, so why not make it coincide with that? And yeah. Now, for this video, of course, you know the deal with these favorite movie countdowns or favorite countdowns in general. These are my opinions. Movies that I personally watched and I personally loved a ton. And with that being said, I didn't watch every single awesome movie that was released that year. So stuff like Lady Bird, Wind River, The Beguiled, Shape of Water, Coco, Disaster Artist. All those films are not going to be on this list because unfortunately I didn't even get a chance to watch it during that year. And also on top of that, just recently I got into movie watching, and because of that, most of the movies or even half of these movies are stuff mainly like guys like me will like, stuff that you will find in Comic-Con. So that will include like animated and cartoon films. That will include sci-fi films like Blade Runner and Star Wars. And of course, that would include superhero films. Fortunately, however, for those that hate superhero films, there's only 3, so it's not gonna pollute the countdown all the way. But anyway, enough of me rambling. Some of you want to know what my favorite films are? Let's get on with it right now. Starting up the countdown at number 10 is Spider-Man Homecoming. Ever since Marvel announced that they were working with Sony to put our favorite web-slinging hero into MCU, I was overjoyed, for they were one step closer to being whole again. Now that the film has come out, I was delighted at what I saw. Taking place after Captain America Civil War, this film has Spidey just straight balancing his 2 lives into one, and everything goes good up until he encounters dangerous villains with high-tech weapons. Of course, it's up to him to stop this group led by a vulture and save New York. What made this movie enjoyable was seeing Peter's struggles on how each action he does in one side of his life affects the other. It's also complemented with the fact that they just went straight into his current struggles without presenting us with the same old origin story like always. Add to this the spectacular, pun intended, performances by Tom Holland and Michael Keaton, who was just amazing as Vulture for how fleshed out and how well acted he was, and you've got a great superhero film that deserves its scores on Metacritic. Despite some flaws with how Peter was portrayed throughout, and a couple of character decisions here and there, I had a great time watching this film, and I can't wait for a sequel. My number 9 is controversial, for I'm putting Star Wars The Last Jedi on this list. Lots of people have already claimed their stances on why this movie's bad, and they are agreeable. However, I really like this film, for I was surprised that they did not make it feel like The Empire Strikes Back. Taking place after The Force Awakens, the story for this film is simple. The First Order is trying to stop the rebellion like last time, while Rey wants to train under Luke and persuade him to help after finding him. Other than being unpredictable, this movie has some great visuals, enjoyable interactions between Rey and Kylo Ren, and no, not because of that shirtless bullcrap that's been a meme recently. and a great fight scene involving our protagonist and antagonist. Although the people's critiques on this film are right on the mark, I still have plenty of fun with this movie, and that wasn't annoying or forgettable as other Star Wars films. Coming in at number 8 is Logan. At first I didn't really want to support this movie because I was a bit stubborn with the X-Men and Fantastic Four film rights mumbo jumbo. Yeah, I sure am retarded for something like that, but I decided to just take a go at it once I had free movie rental, and damn do I regret not watching this movie earlier. Taking place in an alternate world of the X-Men films where mutants are nearly extinct, Logan follows an aging Wolverine who's secretly taking care of a Professor X that is dying. Soon after, he encounters a little girl who surprisingly has his DNA in her, and because the place they're at becomes unsafe, he goes on a quest to bring this girl to a safe haven for people like her. The thing that makes this movie so good is, just like Deadpool, it does not pull punches when it comes to violence, and seeing it as a result from his actions is necessary to a film. Besides that, there's some great acting from Hugh Jackman and Daphne Keane, and the fight scenes were well put together. Also, the end of this film is really emotional. I'll just leave it at that. Being Jackman's final performance as the character, this film ends on a high note, and is worth a watch despite being at number 8. For my number 7, I'm going with Ingrid Goes West. I had interest in this film once I saw it in other people's Letterboxd lists. That, and the fact that it has Elizabeth Olsen and Pom Klementieff in it, who I like a lot. Once I finally watched it, I was really surprised. This film follows a mentally unstable woman named Ingrid Thorburn, who after finding this one popular person on Instagram named Taylor, moves to Los Angeles to try and become her friend. She does become friends with her after doing some sneaky shit, and later on, Ingrid's unstable personality starts to kick in with every time she meets Taylor's other friends and family. What makes this movie so good for me was how every character in this film seemed to be assholes, and just their personalities alone seemed to stand out with the obvious things going to the good acting. On top of that, it has a fair amount of humorous scenes that work, and I feel as if it just gives a great message on how social media is terrible for your well-being. From its message to its impressive ending, I had a fair amount of enjoyment from this film, and if this seems to be something up your alley, check it out. At number 6, I'm going with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I know some people weren't too big into the first Guardians of the Galaxy, but I was greatly surprised to a point that it became my favorite Marvel Studios film of all time. Moving into the second film, Marvel did again, and even though it wasn't extremely surprising as the first, Volume 2 was still a great movie. This film takes place years later after the first, and follows the superhero team of the same name on this adventure when meeting the group leader's father, after they had a mishap with another member of the team. From this, a whole bunch of conflicting things with the father, team members, and friends and foe are created from it, and it's up to the team of the same name to save the universe, as with most superhero films. This movie did so well for me from every aspect, such as great special effects, a nice story with surprising plot twists, great action, and great music and character chemistry, just like the first. Also, it had some great humor, something I personally like in these Marvel films. especially the lines from Dave Bautista's Drax, who just pretty much stole the show for me. By just being a fun movie that played it safe for most part, I love this film, and it's currently my favorite superhero movie of that year. Coming in at number 5 is Good Time. There's this one guy I follow on Twitter who considered this film to be his favorite movie of the year, up until Lady Bird, and considering he knows his movies, I decided to check it out, and hot damn was this a huge surprise. This film follows a criminal named Constantine, whose brother is put into prison after a failed robbery, and it's up to him to try and find a way to bail him out by going to an assortment of places while encountering people that are out to get him. The biggest draw of what made this movie impressive was Robert Pattinson's performance of Constantine. From the movie's beginning, he was a giant piece of shit you automatically dislike, and everything he does makes you wish he got his just desserts, while at the same time wishing he could free his decently behaved brother. Besides that, the music was memorable and fit the tone really well, while also fitting into each scene superbly. I do also have to say that the scene fits real well with what they were going for, and every area just stood out to me. Although the pacing near the end felt a bit rushed, the film I would say is the biggest sleeper hit of the year, from Pence's surprise performance to greenness of the tone and settings to various scenes that just stood out and were surprising, kept me by my seat. This movie needs to be talked more about in my opinion. Number 4 goes to Get Out. Because it was labeled as a horror movie, I contemplated for a while on watching this, but once I found out that it wasn't extremely scary, I checked it out, and as time went on, I do say this is one unique and impressive film. This film follows an interracial couple between a black man named Chris and a white woman named Rose, where they decide to go and meet Rose's family. Once they do, a bunch of weird shit happens with Rose's family and some of the guests they decide to invite, and it's up to Chris to find out what the fuck's going on. While this film does excel in its usual aspects involving plot, acting, and music, the movie just captivated me as a whole with its tones and just being a social commentary about racism as a whole. After watching it, I decided to read about it on the internet, and damn is this film deep with the messages. From the weird and minor stuff to specific plot-related symbolism, I was just blown away in discovering what they meant and how they portrayed it through satire. Now, I can go on and on with discussing the content of the movie, but just for sake of time, I'll say just search it up. Overall, this was a big surprise, and for being known as a comedian, its director Jordan Peele is now somebody whose directing work I'm looking forward to in the future. My number 3 goes to 3, Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. I had no knowledge of this movie whatsoever until one guy who I shouted out in my previous countdown stated that it was one of his favorite films of 2017. So I took notice after that and watched the trailer of it. Once I was able to watch the full movie, man, I was blown away. This film follows a woman named Mildred who decides to put up 3 billboards calling out the local police after they fail to find her daughter's murderer. From this, various problems happen between her and the law enforcement, and it becomes a face-off between her and the people she's associated with, and the cops and townspeople. Right off the bat, this film just recently won some Golden Globes for its acting, and I can agree with. because Frances McDormand just plays an amazing character and her take no shit attitude goes well with her facial expressions. The other supporting actors are also well done, from Sam Rockwell, Woody Harrelson, and Peter Dinklage. Probably the main thing that made this movie so good was its tone, as it was a serious drama that sprinkled a bit of comedy here and there, and that it wasn't forced in. Speaking of drama, the serious scenes that happened in the film were really impressive and surprising, for you expect something obvious to happen, yet it doesn't and changes into something else. Pretty much overall, this movie that came out of nowhere for me surprised me as a whole, and if you haven't seen it, do it, because it's definitely one of last year's best. At number 2 is The Big Sick. Oh man, this is another huge surprise for me, as I didn't know much of this film, and when I decided to rent it after seeing it on other people's 2017 favorites lists, I gotta say this is one beautiful movie. This film follows a Pakistani-American comedian named Kamil who starts dating a white woman named Emily after meeting her from one of his routines, and he keeps it secret from his family, who wants him to follow their customs of being a good Muslim who will marry a Pakistani woman. After a small argument between Kamil and Emily, Emily soon becomes sick and is put into an induced coma, and from this, Kamil is put into a situation where he has to keep a secret from his family, as well as try and please Emily's parents. The thing that makes this movie beautiful is the acting, with seeing what Kamil and the people around him go through from this ordeal, and seeing these actors' emotions and tones from the whole problem is well done in my eyes. Speaking of the ordeal, the scenes relating to it were so good with how it both tugs on the heartstrings while being touching at the same time. Like man, Kamil was such a likable character, and I rooted for him to get the fairy tale happy ending he well deserves near the end of this film, for he sacrifices a lot, and coming to realization of how much he loves Emily was nice throughout. Despite being a bit long for a romance film, this is a movie that you need to see if you're into romantic shit. Heck, it was a good movie so much for me that I think that even people who hate romance movies will probably enjoy it. Now with how much I gushed over this film, you'd expect me to top it off. Surprisingly, there was a film that I liked more than this, which is just straight blew up my mind, and let's get on to it, as my number 1. Finally, coming in at number 1 as my favorite movie of 2017, I have to go with Blade Runner 2049. Around last summer, I became a fan of the series, for I watched the first film for the first time around that time, and I could see why it's so beloved. From this, I then became hyped for 2049, and I must say, this series is starting to become a huge obsession of mine. This film follows a guy named Officer K, whose career involves exterminating these cyborgs known as replicants in the future. After killing one, he's put into an adventure that relates to some items that was buried by the said replicant he killed. And of course, it's up to him to find out what went on with said replicant. First off, when going into this film, one thing that instantly gets you hooked is its visuals, and this film looks majorly impressive from it. To quote YouTuber Ultimate Floyd on his video about this movie does some good world building, with seeing how some areas technologically advanced while some turn out to be inhospitable. It's both captivating and well created. Speaking of technologically advanced areas, Seeing the visuals for these places are just a sight to behold, with the various use of CG and the bright neon effects just making these scenes orgasmic. Now while it may sound like this film is all style and no substance, that statement would be false, for the story and characters are great as well. Spoiler warning for this part, but every character from what I've seen does well for who they were playing. Ryan Gosling plays a great replicant, Jared Leto plays a good corporate entity, the side roles were great where they were Officer K superiors, or Dave Bautista in his role as Sepper Morden, and of course Harrison Ford's return as the original Blade Runner protagonist Deckard was pleasing to see with how broken he is in this film. As for story, while it's great, it has a couple of plot intense moments that just support the mysterious story overall. And at these times, I was like, oh shit, during many of the action scenes or tense scenes all throughout, especially near the end. Overall, despite purists of the original film calling this one shit, and the fact that it has some flaws here and there, I found Blade Runner 2049 to be an enjoyable experience. Even if you might be disparaged from it because of its long-ass runtime, I enjoyed spending those 2.5 hours just being taken back with a sequel of a film that's over 30 years old. So those were my favorite movies of last year. Like always, let me know what some of your favorite movies were, because I love reading the comments and hearing all these opinions on the films and whatnot. And that's pretty much it for this video. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching. Take it easy, and until next video.